Hello, hello. My name is Matthew Holden. I will be doing our quantum presentation for the evening, Earth 2.0 Quantum Earth. This is a presentation that I've been waiting to give for a long time, but I never ever got around to it, so I figured I would do it today. In any case, our species is having a very difficult time understanding quantum physics, so I figured I would show you how the quantum physics works. It does not work the way that most people think it does. Almost all the theoretical physicists and all of the people on Earth have a singular idea, a Newtonianistic idea of how quantum physics works, but it doesn't work that way. It works the way I'm going to show you today. Quantum physics is a spiritualistic science. It's radically different than any other kind of physics you've ever seen before once you get into how it works, and it correlates perfectly with symmetry and balance in the universe. So we will get started, and keep in mind that I know that this video, especially if you're not into metaphysics, is going to stretch your belief system, but every word of it is 100% true. The Nonlinear Quantum Model of Reality, Consciousness-Based Physics, Matthew J. Holden. Introduction. Human scientific development has focused entirely on the physical side of reality under the assumption that this model is reality. That assumption is incorrect. Quantum physics requires a thought redefinition as humanity and our understanding of nature evolves from materialism to spiritualism, physical to metaphysical. We will start with the American GDP data. About 3 years ago, probably more than that now, 4 years ago, I ran into this chart on Google Images when I was searching for something else, and it just perplexed me from the moment I saw it. And let me explain why. If we look at the data, both the male and female sexes were on synonymous trajectories pre-1972, right at the end of the arrow. And then in 1972, something really weird happens. The female sex continues on its current trajectory, but the male sex goes negative. The male sex basically collapses. And the reason this intrigued me is because what we are told on a regular basis is that the reason that this happened was for economic reasons. And I after studying this for a while, and I had studied objective analysis under Ayn Rand and Nathaniel Branden, who were objectivists, and I realized that this could not have been an economic event. There is no way for the economy to have created this event. It's impossible. Because the economy can't discriminate. And this event in 1972 that affected the male population only affected one half of the species. There is no economic event that can only affect one half of the species. So this could not have been caused by globalization or post-industrialness or whatever other nonsense that we're told on a daily basis. In fact, this event does not correspond to any laws of physics as we currently understand them. This event is impossible. This event in 1972 where the male sex goes sideways like this cannot happen under our current understanding of physics. It's impossible unless a meteor hits the planet, but even that couldn't affect one half of the population and not the other. There is no event that can affect only one half of the population and not the other half. That is an impossibility. So that led me to trying to figure out, well, what the hell is going on here? And I came to the inevitable conclusion that there was some other form of physics at play here. This was not any kind of physics that we had ever been introduced to. And so I spent 3 years solving this thing, and in so doing, I figured out all of the basic parameters of actual quantum physics, not the physics that we're told, or the theoretical physicists. The theoretical physicists are off in Delusionalville when it comes to how quantum physics works. They're not even in the same ballpark as how it actually works. But figuring out this event right here, you solve quantum physics, because this was a quantum event. Concept number 1, the quantum equation, E equals mc squared. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, or metaphysics, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. Nikola Tesla, probably my favorite scientist who ever lived. I think everyone loves Nikola Tesla. The Newtonian physical model of reality. Currently on planet Earth, all human thinking is based on this equation and the correlation between energy and mass. This is Newtonian classical mechanics. That's economics, that's the Industrial Revolution, that's the physics that you learned in your education system and in high school. It's based off this equation and the relationship between energy and mass. It's a physicalistic physics where the energy that they're talking about is physical energy. Okay? This is basically the whole world currently runs on this equation with the relationship between energy and mass, and the c squared is constant. In quantum physics, the relationship changes completely from energy and mass to energy and c squared, where the mass remains constant. So quantum physics is a massless physics. It is consciousness-based, and you change reality metaphysically from the relationship between E energy and c squared. Completely different kind of physics with a completely different kind of mechanics. And when you get in to see how these mechanics work, they're basically crazy. This is like Harry Potter physics, magical physics almost, once you start getting into it. In fact, the reason most people can't accept quantum physics because it's so far outside their worldview. It smashes all of the basic, understandings that the human species has about how physics works. So the quantum model, physics and consciousness, and this is the whole deal. Assume that my flower of life over here is a consciousness and it's vibrating at a frequency. That frequency representing energy creates mc squared reality based on the relationship between energy and the speed of light squared, where mass remains constant. Energy creates reality, where energy means consciousness. It fits perfectly into the equation. A 5-year-old could understand it. There's nothing complex about any of this. Consciousness creates reality. Now, the quantum physicists and the theoretical physicists on the planet, they already know this. Okay, they know, or they're coming to the conclusion that quantum physics is a consciousness-based physics. Yes, it is a consciousness-based physics. But the reason that's so hard to grasp is because it looks like we're in a physical reality. By all, visual looking, we live in a physical reality. It's not metaphysical at all, but it is entirely metaphysical. We actually live in essentially a consciousness experiment, a physical reality that is a consciousness experiment that is so good you can't tell the difference. It looks physical. It looks completely physical. That's how ingenious the design is. And it works for an individual. Whatever is the vibrational rate of your consciousness will create your reality. As simple as that. That's how the physics works. You create your own reality through the vibrational frequency of your consciousness. And the exact same physics works for a country. Because quantum physics is non-linear science, the three-dimensional laws of physics break down. And because in quantum physics everything is energy, I am energy, you are energy, a tree is energy, dogs are energy, cats are energy, all the animals are energy, the planet is energy, a country is energy. In quantum physics, everything is energy. Just different forms of energy vibrating at different frequencies. The basis of quantum science. And we're going to look at a very quick example to prove the concept. Now, there was a very famous doctor named Masaru Emoto in Japan, and he performed what is now a very famous experiment. There's all kinds of videos on YouTube over this. I think it was called Messages in Water. I would highly recommend that you look at the videos on YouTube. That's Dr. Masaru Emoto, Messages in Water, I believe. And what he did was he took ice crystals from different lakes in the world, and he would freeze the little tiny pieces of ice crystal or water crystals. He would freeze them, but while he was freezing them, he would apply a stimulus. He would either write a word on the container, or he would play music, or he would pray. And what he found was, depending on what stimulus he applied, either positive or negative, it would completely change the nature of the ice crystal. And the ice crystal would be either positive or negative, depending on what energy was applied. So a positive energy always created a beautiful ice crystal, and a negative energy always produced a very negative ice crystal. And it was completely consistent. And this forms the basis of quantum physics. Energy creates reality. Now, if we apply this science to a country, it works the exact same way. From a quantum perspective, there's no difference between an ice crystal and a country. They're just both different forms of energy. The same physics applies. Okay? And so whether or not your country looks like a beautiful ice crystal or it looks like something really ugly like the I will kill you is entirely dependent on the energy that you apply to the country. Very simple premise, very simple physics. So we have E equals mc squared covered, and we will move into the highlight of the presentation, quantum metaphysical geometry. Nobody has seen this before, and this part of the presentation is basically groundbreaking. This is the earth-shattering part of quantum physics, because quantum physics is a spiritualistic physics, and everything is designed in symmetry. Wait till you see where the two sexes come from. The universe is designed in symmetry and balance. This balance includes the sexes, both male and female, each sex representing a metaphysical archetype, an extension of the laws of physics, and the universal design concept of objective and subjective. Objective and subjective. And that's what each one of the sexes are. When the creative intelligence created our universe, everything was designed in perfect symmetry. There's a spiritual structure to it. And the whole concept of the universe is masculine and feminine. The purpose of the universe was for life to exist, and all life exists under the masculine and feminine archetype, all evolved life. Now, the feminine represents the subjective or creative side of reality. It represents the E, energy, in the E equals MC squared equation. It's emotive, creative, intuitive, represents art. It's non-linear, and it's represented by a circle. That represents feminine. Masculine is the exact opposite. Masculine represents the objective side of the universe. Mathematical, logical, science, building and design. It's linear, and it's represented by a straight line. Okay? Masculine straight line, feminine circle. And I'm going to spend the next few slides proving this concept to you, irrefutably. Everything is designed in perfect symmetry. We have E equals MC squared, and then that means energy equals matter, and that means that the metaphysical equals the physical, and that means that the feminine metaphysical equals the masculine physical, and that means that the circle equals the straight line. Everything is designed in perfect symmetry. And both the masculine and the feminine aspects exist in the E equals MC squared equation. The relationship between energy and mass, which is Newtonian physics, is physical science. It's linear. That is called the male science. The other science, quantum physics, which is the relationship between energy and the speed of light squared, is a metaphysical science. It's nonlinear, represented by a circle, the feminine. Both masculine and feminine are represented inside the exact same equation, representing two different kinds of physics, linear and nonlinear. And the era we're moving into is nonlinear physics, which is the feminine kind of physics, the circle. And when you put the two pieces together, the circle, which is the feminine, and the linear, which is the masculine, we get the phi symbol, the physics of consciousness, or masculine and feminine in one. And this is the core of quantum physics. Quantum physics is a metaphysical, spiritualistic physics. Okay, and the physics and the mechanics are very spiritualistic, built on a very extremely intelligent design. And that's the big jump for most people, trying to grasp just how intelligently designed and in symmetry everything in our world really is. And the phi symbol, which represents masculine and feminine in one, is also known as the golden ratio, phi. If you read any videos on the YouTube on phi or the golden ratio, it's always represented by the phi symbol, which is masculine and feminine in one. The golden ratio and Fibonacci sequence correlating to 1.618 is found all over nature, human design, and the universe. And the reason is very simple. It's the natural vibratory frequency of the universe. And so in order to design something with the perfect ratio, the golden ratio, you need the phi ratio. Okay? And so there is a spiritual, mathematical / quantum relationship in the universe. It's just, the whole thing is amazing, the way everything fits together perfectly. Divine geometry. Each sex represents a physical design concept congruent with their quantum geometries. As we can see, the male archetype is linear. It almost looks like a straight line. And the female profile looks like a circle. That's not an accident. Both sexes are designed from their metaphysical geometry. That our reality is not physical. It is not nearly as biological as people think it is. It's quantum. And if we look at the IQs of the two sexes, now academics have understood that there is an asymmetric distribution between the IQs of male and female, but they don't know why. Why do male dominate the top and bottom sides of the IQ spectrum? Well, it's very simple. It comes right from the metaphysical geometry. If you take this graph and you plot it in terms of its geometry, you get two big bars like you see in the middle, a big bar representing the masculine and a smaller bar representing the feminine, which correlates perfectly to the ratios in their metaphysical geometry. If you take these bars and you turn them around, that's what you're looking at, phi. And so the reason the IQs of the two sexes are the way they are is because they are a direct reflection of phi. And if we look at the sexual genitalia of both sexes, the female sex is a circle representing nonlinear. It is internal, which represents the feminine, and it contracts, which is a negative. All aspects of the feminine, and it's there in the female genitalia. The male genitalia is the opposite. It's what? It's a line, like a straight line. It's a circle, it's a straight line. It's linear. It expands, which represents the masculine, positive expansion, and it's external, which are all principles of the masculine. And so once you start watching all of this evidence, it becomes impossible to refute. It is not an accident that the sexual genitalia of both sexes perfectly correspond with their metaphysical geometries. I mean, come on. Like, you would have to be completely blind not to see the obviousness of this. Everything is perfectly designed. And we have the brain structures of each sex. If we look at the male brain structure with the connectivity is in the blue, it runs from front to back. It's linear, just like the male archetype. The female archetype, which is the orange on our right, is from side to side. It's nonlinear, just like the feminine nonlinear. Okay, their two brain structures, the sexes, are completely different. And if we have a breakdown of all of the different, these are some of the different principles, because the two sexes are polarities, they always represent the opposite. The feminine represents the E, the masculine MC squared. We have potential energy, feminine, kinetic energy, masculine. The feminine represents the negative, the masculine, the positive. Nonlinear, linear, metaphysical, physical, subjective, objective, relative, absolute. Indirect, direct, internal, external, follow, lead. In every respect, the sexes are polarities of each other. Complete polarities. And if we look at a simple equation, which is the infinite form of consciousness, which actually represents the feminine, all infinite consciousness potential, represented by the infinity symbol, correlates into a single reality or a single frequency, which is the masculine. The feminine always equals the masculine. The infinite and the one are combined in a single reality. Now that we have covered masculine and feminine metaphysical geometry, I hope you really enjoyed that part. I love teaching it. It's my favorite part because it's it's so brain popping when you see it in front of your face, and it becomes so self-evident. But for people to actually grasp that our reality works like this, in this very intelligently designed spiritualistic way, I think is the coolest shit ever. We are moving on now to positive and negative, each sex representing a positive and a negative aspect of creation, where the male sex is the positive and the female sex represents the negative. That doesn't mean that the female sex is negative. It's just that the female sex always exists polarized and relative to the masculine. So if the male energy is positive, the female energy is negative. If the male energy is negative, the female energy is positive. They're always polarized. And we have summer cycles. We have summer and winter, the negative of the winter and the positive of the summer. We have the stock market, which cycles up and down, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, over and over and over forever, representing the masculine and feminine phases. We have a heartbeat, which has a single cycle, which happens over and over again. The expand portion is masculine and contract. Expand, contract, forever. Concept number 4, we get into the mechanics of consciousness. This is how we apply all of the different things we have been learning in reality. So quantum radius, as we can see, the male sex is bigger. The reason the male sex is bigger is because it has a bigger metaphysical geometry. And physical reality always conforms to the metaphysical. It's metaphysical geometry. And because the male sex is linear and it has a larger radius, I'm using the numbers 1.00 radii for the feminine and 1.2 radii for the masculine, just as a conceptual understanding. Okay, and so the masculine energy is bigger than the female energy. And this, because the male energy has an extended radius, it creates a very interesting scenario. If the male energy is positive, your reality is positive in a country or on a planet. If the male energy is negative, if the positive gets inverted negative and the negative gets flipped upside down, then your reality is negative. And so whether or not for a country your reality is positive or negative is entirely dependent on the position of the male energy. The male energy represents the absolute. The feminine energy always exists relative to it. Okay? And so there's two dominant frequencies, positive and negative. Okay? And whether or not you are in a positive or negative vibrational state is completely dependent on the male energy. And so the male energy from a metaphysical perspective is basically everything. And that's why our world is in such a mess it's in, because the people who run our world are playing around with this because they've had this physics for quite a while. Now, everything vibrates, and a natural vibration of everything is like this, with the positives on the top and the negatives on the bottom. A nice, beautiful sine wave vibrating naturally. If we apply a force to a sine wave, if we apply a force, a metaphysical force, to a frequency or to an energy, it inverts the sine wave upside down, where we get the negatives on the top and the positives on the bottom. We get a shift in frequency. And so this is how you shift a civilization or an energy, because all the country is an energy. The way you shift it negative is by applying a force, and that changes the frequency of civilization. Very simple concept. And we see it right here. If we apply a force to the male frequency, it inverts with the positive on the bottom and the negative on the top, and the same, and this is how the sine wave looks. Negatives on the top and the positives on the bottom. So, concept number 5. We are now going to apply all the science that we have learned in this presentation, and I'm going to show you why America is in decline and how to fix it. And it's an unbelievably simple physics. A 5-year-old could understand it. So we come back to our chart that we saw at the beginning of the presentation, the 1947 to 2010 GDP data broken down by sex. And as we see in 1972, the sex is split, okay? Just like earlier. Now we're going to find out the reason for that. Remember, it was 1972. So I went looking in 1972 for some sort of discriminatory force written in 1972 against the male sex, and I found it. It was Title IX, gender equality. No person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Now, that sounds all fine and dandy. Who could be against non-discrimination? Nobody. But the issue is there's different definitions for discrimination. And the primary definition, the official definition of discrimination in the dictionary, is distinction. To make a distinction. So if we change the definition of discrimination in Title IX to distinction, we get a completely different law. Now we get no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to distinctions under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Now this has a completely different meaning than the first. And this is the problem with playing around with words. And because there are, in fact, distinctions between the sexes, if you pass a law and say there isn't, that is discrimination. And so non-discrimination, when you apply the principle of distinction, becomes non-distinction, which is discrimination against the male sex, written from this law in 1972. And as we have learned, if you apply a force, a metaphysical force, which is what discrimination is, you flip the frequency upside down. You see? The frequency flips when a force is applied. And this Title IX legislation wrote a discriminatory force against the male sex. And so if we come back to our chart again, a discriminatory force was applied in 1972 versus men from Title IX, shifting the frequency negative. 1972, there go the women, and there go the men. Perfect timing. And so the reason that the Western world is in decline has nothing to do with economics. It has nothing to do with globalization. It has nothing to do with automation or robots. It's collapsing because the male energy was flipped negative in 1972 because of Title IX and gender equality. And in fact, there is a boy crisis in all of the Western countries, which is synonymous from a discriminatory education system. All the facts align perfectly with my summation of what's happening to the Western world. Title IX force in 1972. Now, we're going to take a look at how much has the United States lost because of this discriminatory law in 1972, and it's astronomical. Equality has cost America 2% a year for 45 years. That's 125% of GDP. The current American GDP for fiscal year 2017 is $20 trillion. The American economy would be the $20 trillion that it is, plus 125%, which is $45 trillion. That means the United States economy is missing $25 trillion just this year in terms of economic productivity from the country as a consequence of gender equality. Over 45 years, net losses approach 400 trillion, meaning if we take the 25 trillion it's lost this year and we count back all the way back to 1972 in descending style, in sort of a negative compounding way, we get something in the order of 400 trillion lost in terms of net accumulated compounded productivity for the United States, which is an astronomical number. And that's just the United States. This is happening all over the Western world. We're in the quadrillions and quadrillions lost because of feminism. The American workforce would be doubled. Tax revenue this year would increase by 16%, which is about the average net federal taxation rate for the federal government, times the extra 25 trillion, which means the United States would have an extra 4 trillion in tax revenue just this year, which means the United States on average this year would have a $3 trillion surplus. Isn't that amazing? As poorly as the United States government is governed, as bad as the country's been run into the ground, it would have a $3 trillion surplus this year, and there would basically be no debt in the country. The United States would be debt-free if it simply had not have done feminism. And the total lost tax revenue over the 45 years is $60 trillion ish, which is, again, an astronomical amount of money. Paid off all the national debt, all the state debt, and a lot of the consumer debt in the country. That $60 trillion would pay off virtually all the debt. That is my presentation. Thank you for watching. This is Earth 2.0, Quantum Earth. I am on Twitter at 5D Logic or on YouTube at 5D Logic. My name is Matthew Holden. Thank you for watching my presentation on quantum physics. I'm going to be doing lots of more stuff on quantum physics. This is just the beginning. Once you get into the physics and how you can use the physics to solve policy problems and fix reality, it's actually quite amazing. Once again, thank you for watching my presentation, and I am out.